I'm going to have to ask someone to let go of their watch. I promise I will not steal it. I will give it back. But does someone have like a real watch that I could hold?
Don't do it.
Steve, you better give me yours, Jeanette. Thank you so much.
I've already pawned it.
You already pawned it. Thank you so much. My name's Sarah Nemechek, and I'm an alcoholic. Goodness gracious. All right. It's nice to be here. I want to thank Amy and Kelly and Connie for coming from my home group. Poor Kelly and Amy, I've got to remember to GPS this thing like at the time of rush hour so I can know exactly how much time it's going to take. I usually do it in the beginning during the day, and it gives a totally different amount of time, and I just need to make that adjustment. So the next person that asks me to speak from this home group, can you just remind me to GPS it before, like at that time of the day, please? But anyway, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Primary Purpose Group in Durham. We meet on Tuesday and Friday nights. We would love to have you. We meet at 7:30. If you're ever in Durham, you're welcome to come. And we still have a hybrid format. So Connie actually lives down here close to you guys, but she's a member of our home group, and we love her. And so she joins us virtually. So please meet Connie afterwards, because she is new to this area, but she's a wealth of Alcoholics Anonymous experience. And so, so tune in or come in person. And my sobriety date is December 24th, 1998. I'm almost positive Daniel's got more years on me, quite a few more years on me. So, but I'm just happy to have a sobriety date and to be here today. Wallace, thank you for asking me to be here. It's always an honor and a privilege to do anything for Wallace. Wallace is the person that I have known the longest in Alcoholics Anonymous, probably. He met me when I was in the Scoggin Center in Sanford. I don't know how many of you guys know that was an adolescent transitional living center, kind of like an adolescent halfway house. And so I would go to noon meetings there on Moore Street in Sanford years and years and years ago. I was 17 years old, and I would see Wallace at that noon meeting. And so he remembers me even before this period of sobriety. So it's always, an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm just so grateful for the introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous that I've been given, and to be able to still be here today, active, in all those ways that Daniel's talked about. So I'm going to tell you in a general way. I think I've gotten the little boxes checked of like things that I've said, so I'm going to launch into my story. I'm going to tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. I'm going to try to bring us in on time. I talk fast. People can't believe I'm from the South because I talk so fast, but just tell me to slow down. I speak Spanish too, so I'll try to stay in English. Amy has asked that we listen to English music on the way home, and if I launch off into Spanish, just veer me back, Alrighty, so I'm originally from Wilson, North Carolina. I grew up there. I only left Wilson because I got sober and was able to go on to bigger, better places, go to college, things like that. But I would have died there if it had not been for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I'm from a great family. I didn't grow up in alcoholism, though I have alcoholism in both sides of my family. My dad probably had problems with alcohol when he was younger, but he would be what our book classifies as a hard drinker. He was given a good reason to stop or moderate, and he was able to do so. But I didn't grow up with seeing it. So I was raised in a good home. I had some unfortunate things happen to me as a child, but it wasn't in my home, it was by an uncle, and I've learned that it's very common, but for many years I thought I was the only one that happened to. I lived with it in secret for 7 years, happened regularly for 7 years, and it was obviously something that just affected me and caused me to live inside, and let off a secret, I didn't obviously think there was anybody I could talk to about that, but I blamed my alcoholism for that for a long time, but I've come to realize today that that's not what makes me an alcoholic. But I had a good childhood. I was raised in a loving family with a lot of good morals and principles and values demonstrated. I was raised in the church. I was raised Catholic, and I had a good experience with that. I went to Catholic school for 7 years, and I thought I wanted to be a Catholic nun when I got older, and the joke is now is that I became a fallen woman, and instead of being a Catholic nun, and I still am an active member of the church, but I kind of got off path for a while, but I was introduced to a concept of God that was loving, that could help me in times of need, that I could reach out to. So I was introduced to all that stuff as a child. My earliest memories as a child were of fear and of anxiety. I still have anxiety. I'm an anxious person. I'm naturally caffeinated. I'm just like this. I don't drink any caffeine because people can't tolerate me if I drink caffeine. But I've been anxious and full of fear my whole life. My earliest memories are of laying awake in bed and shaking because of the physical manifestations of fear that I had, that I couldn't shut my mind off. I couldn't shut my worries off. I couldn't stop thinking about the what ifs of life. And we talk about a lot of those what ifs, staying out of the what ifs, staying in today and not going to the future. We talk about that here in Alcoholics Anonymous, but years ago I didn't have the tools to be able to do that kind of thing, to stay in today, to not think about the future, to not obsess about what could happen. But I lived in the what ifs as a child, and it would grip me physically. And so I had panic attacks as far back as I can remember. And so I was a good student. I did well until I found alcohol. I was a competitive swimmer. I did very well in that. I dedicated my life to that until I found alcohol. I had colleges writing me as a freshman in high school, and I could have done great things with that, but alcohol, became more important. I started drinking when I was about 13 or 14 years old. I was working on a horse farm. This is horse country. I was working on a horse farm, and I was doing a summer camp where kids would come during the day. They would learn how to ride, and then we were camp counselors, and we would stay there on the farm and sleep there at night, and just we were in those years where our parents were taxi drivers, and so instead of driving us back and forth every day, they just let us stay there. And that was when I was first introduced to alcohol. It was one night at that summer camp while I was working there. And I was running with these other kids, and I've already kind of hinted that I had a lot of the isms of alcoholism prior to drinking. I had a lot of fear. I just felt like I had been dealt a bad hand in life. I was very angry. I compared myself to other people a lot. I thought other people always had a better deal, better opportunities, better families, more money, things like that. But I was running with these two girls, and they were so cool, and I was not. My last name, to this day, I never changed it when I got married, but my last name's Nemechek, and my nickname at school was Nerdachek. So that kind of tells you how cool I was. Another thing that was going against me was that I had the before pictures of Proactive. I had acne very bad. And so I was not very cool. I was filled with fear and insecurity, and I didn't know how to talk to people. And so I was running with these two girls that I just idolized, and I compared myself to them, and they were so comfortable in their own skin. And it's kind of like what maybe you guys have heard someone talk about in AA, where they had gone to school, or all the other kids had gone to school on the day that I had missed, and it was the one day that they presented the handbook of life, and I missed that day, and I never got it. And these two girls just really seemed like they just knew how to live life so comfortably and so easily, and I did not have that experience. And so I was running with these girls, and we all proceeded to drink that first night that I was exposed to alcohol. And they bought 4 beverages. There were 3 of us girls drinking, and each of us got 3 because it was a pack of 4. That's why we got 4. And I immediately recognized the effect produced by alcohol. I recognized what it did for me. It allowed me to shake off those fears, those what-if things running through my head, those insecurities, the way that I compared myself to those girls. I was suddenly, I went from less than to better than those other girls. I could talk to guys. We all had our eyes set on this one guy, and he paid attention to me that night. And prior to that night, he wouldn't have even known I was in the room. And so it was a spiritual experience, like Wallace describes in his story, on many different levels. And so we, so I told you mathematically we each got one drink because it was a pack of 4. There was one left over. And I desperately needed that effect produced by alcohol so much from the very first exposure to it that I can guarantee you that I got that last drink that was left over. I needed more of whatever that was. I needed more because that was my key to life. That was my handbook for life. That was me fitting in life. And so I don't remember anything else about that night. It wasn't a terrible, drunken mess. I didn't puke, anything like that. I just remember that the next day I wanted to do it again. And so we begged her, the older, person supervising us, could they get us more? And she laughed and said, I'm raising a bunch of alcoholics here, and I'm here. I don't know about those other 2 girls. One I think is doing fine. The other girl I just lost track of. But I definitely made it to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was an alcoholic, in full bloom from the very first, exposure. So I'm a person that realized from the very beginning that if alcohol worked that well on a Saturday night, it would work just as well on a Wednesday night, and it would work just as well on a Wednesday morning. And so a dear friend of mine, he has a little saying that if you take the morning drink before you need the morning drink, it won't be long before you need that morning drink. And that was definitely my case. I didn't have limits on my drinking the way a lot of people say that they put rules on their drinking or tried to control their drinking. I just didn't ever have any of that. And so anytime was fair game. And so I had to I had to work pretty hard to drink in the beginning. I told you I didn't come from a drinking family. My family had alcohol in the home, and I definitely stole from the bottles that they had in the house. Now, I should probably tell you that the bottles that they had in their house were the very same bottles from their wedding 15 years ago. That's how much they drank. And so I didn't have to worry about watering it down or anything, but I was definitely one of those people that drank in preparation to go out drinking. I had it hidden in my closet. I could feel the energy of a Friday, and I just kind of started pumping it up early, all day long while I'm getting my hair. I'm drinking out of a little cup, like a normal kitchen cup, and I've got my own little, wet bar in the closet, mixing it up, and so started out like that. And I was a person that, if I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about drinking. I don't know if you understand that, but I was always thinking about drinking. When I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about drinking. I was planning my next drink. I only accepted invitations if drinking were to be involved. I lived to drink from that very point. I just needed more of it any time. And I'm also a person that had consequences from their drinking from the very beginning. I don't know that I really experienced a lot of free and all those golden years that the literature makes reference to. I mean, I had my golden years, but they were filled with consequences. And obviously I made it Alcoholics Anonymous very young. So the progression was there, but it was very rapid. And so I had consequences, as consequences first and foremost happened with the people I was drinking with, because my behavior was really never acceptable to those I was drinking with. I didn't know how to respect personal boundaries. I didn't know how to not break the law, things like that. I gravitated towards people that were getting in trouble, who had done time and things like that. And so I was just kind of had a magnet for trouble. And so I had a lot of problems and consequences when drinking. I couldn't, no matter how hard I started out an evening, I would start out my evenings with very good intentions of it playing out a certain way, of making it home in good condition and by a good time. And no matter how hard I tried, once I put that first drink in my body, all bets were off. There was no predicting just anything that would happen that evening. And so, and that was many evenings, it could have been any day that I could be talking about. So, I did get sent away I had an intervention done on me. By the time I was 16, I'd made it to my first AA meeting. I went in support of someone else that I was drinking with. Now, mind you, I always had older drinking friends. My best drinking buddy at the end was 54 years old, and I was 17, 18 years old. But we drank the same. And so I always kind of hung out with older people. But this lady, I made it to my first AA meeting. I went in support of her, but I did convince her to drink afterwards, which I'm sad to say. But I got intervened upon when I was 16. I was deemed a danger to self and others. I have had a slurry of many mental health, diagnoses over the years, and alcohol thrown on top of that does not make anything better. So I was intervened upon first, probably for mental health reasons. I was sent to a psych ward in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and I was just kind of detoxed there, and I was maintained there. It was almost like a little vacation, like people that were upset with me about drinking escapades that I had could forget about that. I had people driving by my house, revving their engines, threatening me. So I kind of needed to get away and let them forget, and me kind of just relax a little bit, get my bearings again, and so I stayed there for probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks, just a regular standard detox. And then I was given some psychiatric medications and sent home. And I was advised to not drink with these medications. But the good alcoholic that I am, I had to at least see what it did. And I just realized it really didn't do anything. I didn't think so. So I just mixed it all. And so continued to live the way that I was living. I was a gypsy. I lived out of my trunk. My daughter heard about this. My husband he's a member of AA too, and he must have made reference. I have a 12-year-old daughter. She actually asked me about that I used to live out of my car, and I had to kind of explain to her what that meant. But I had a bag packed at all times because I never knew what life would hold. So I just had a change of clothes and a double of shampoos and any hygiene products, and so I would always, it's just never knew what a night would hold. So it was the way that I drank. And so I continued to drink the way that I was drinking, and in the preceding year, the following year, I probably had what was maybe my worst year of active alcoholism. It was a very low year. It was a very dark year. I was very depressed. It did not help that I was consuming so many depressants. It did not help that I was not, I was a binge drinker in the sense that I would go out on a weekend and binge all weekend long and then emerge remorseful on Monday, pulling it back together to make it back to school. I was in high school at this time, and I'd have the fear of having to face all the people that had seen me in my drunken escapades, that I often didn't remember what I had done in my drunken escapades. So I had no defense sometimes. It was awful. It was a particularly hard time for my younger sister, because she overlapped years in high school with me. And so she would likewise go back to school on Monday morning and hear all the things that I had done. And I don't know about you guys, but not all of that was always true. It really was not always true. Like there were some memories, like moments of being able to remember everything, and I know that was not true. But yet things began to circulate. But the problem, I think, the trouble for a member of the family of an alcoholic is that they don't know what's true or not. And it was just equal torture for her. It was a rough year. I experienced things that year that just kind of took that drawing of the line that when it gets this bad, I'll stop, but I erased that line once I got there and realized, it's not so bad, I'll move that line out farther. It was just a really rough year with that. The demoralization, unbelievable, the fallen woman, the things that I grew to be comfortable with, that I thought was the only normal way to live. I truly believed it. I was convinced that my family was an abnormal family in the sense that they didn't drink, and that if they would just give me my space and support me and back me like other people's families, then I wouldn't have the problems with my drinking that I had. And so I just had this whole story made up in my mind that I believed. And so I walked the streets. I got to the point where I walked the streets of my town. I do have some drugs in my story, but I don't have enough drugs to really make an NA. They don't really take me seriously in NA. So everything I'm describing to you, it looked like people that were on worse, harder substances. That's how my drinking looked from the outside, but I was really pretty much on alcohol and living in the lifestyle of people who sold those other substances. And so it was a mess. And so I walked the streets of my town at night. I would sometimes turn my neighbor's dog loose to walk with me, so I didn't have to walk by myself. I slept outdoors. I hid a bottle in a leaf pile around the corner of my house. I kept a journal. I compared myself to Anne Frank, who was a survivor of the Holocaust. The Jewish, oh my gosh. That's how pour me a drink kind of life I thought I had. I thought someone would find my journal one day that I would write under streetlight in the middle of the night, like out walking the streets. I thought they'd find that one day and publish it and just say, this girl, I would have drank too if I'd had the life this girl had. Just justifying everything, to me. And so I know how to live. I'm kind of a country girl in a lot of respects, and so I know how to live outside. I know how to sleep outside, and I often did that. Unfortunately, my worst moments coincided with the winter, and so it was just a terrible, combination. And sometimes I had, shoes that had holes in the bottom of them that it would get wet walking. I remember I got kicked out of my house many times. I got all my clothes bagged up in laundry bags. My parents were introduced to Al-Anon very early, and they bagged up my clothes and threw them out. And sometimes they threw me. Sometimes I got kicked out. Other times I ran away. It was a combination of the two, but it was just a tumultuous family life. And I, again, was the oldest of 4. So it was a lot of chaos in that home because of the things that I had brought into the home, the chaos I had caused in the home. And so I got sent away the following, almost a year to the date of the first experience. I got taken into custody. It was not so graceful. I was actually handcuffed and taken into custody. And in a roundabout way, I made it to a detox in Raleigh that's got a different name now. I'm not familiar with its name, but it was Charter Holly Hill. And so I made it there, and I was detoxed. I know what the inside of a padded room looks like. And I was angry about being there. I, again, was believing this story that I had made in my mind, that if people would just leave me alone, if my family would support me, if they were normal drinkers, if they knew how to drink normally, then they wouldn't think my drinking looked so abnormal. They're the teetotalers that they were, the abstinent people that they were, if they had just been more open to drinking, I wouldn't be so extreme. And so I just believed all that stuff. And so I was this program served as another little detox, just clearing my head. We had family meetings, and my parents would come and support me there, and they would make the trip. And I remember just sitting down and making family plans. I was still an adolescent. I was a minor. And I remember that family plans were made, and my parents ended up making the decision that in order to live with themselves, that they decided to have me placed somewhere until I turned 18 so that they could know and they could have some peace of mind to know that they had done everything that they could to help me while they still had legal power to help me. And I respect that today. I'm a mom today. I understand that today. I hope that if I'm placed in that position, I'll be able to do the same thing. But I was so angry at the time. I felt betrayed. I felt like my family had turned on me. I decided that moment I would wash my hands of my family. I didn't need them. I'd learned to live without them. They didn't exist to me. Went into this group home, this transitional living center, with the mentality that I was going to bolt, I was going to run. I told you I could live outdoors. I started collecting lighters, and I started collecting change and any contraband I could get my hands on, and I was going to go one day. But that's where I met Wallace. We were forced to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings every day there. The program was based on the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in a lot of ways. We would wake up in the mornings and we would do a daily reflections. During the day, one day or another, we would do a 12 and 12 study, or we would do a big book study. We had, again, meetings every day. It was highly encouraged to get a sponsor and to have that sponsor come in and actually work the steps with us. It was a locked facility, so since we were adolescents, we couldn't come and go. We had to have people come into us inside and work with us. And so I had another belief firmly fixed in my mind that since I had not used all the substances that these other kids had used, I was therefore not as bad as these other kids. I firmly believed that. And so I went to the director of the program and I proceeded to tell him that they had made a big mistake, that I did not belong in this program, that I really didn't need to be here. I'm not as bad as these other kids, and I think that I should therefore be able to go home. And he looked at me, and every time I read this in the big book, now I'm not good about saying the big book word for word. I can't quote it, but I know what they're getting at. And he said that I had the mind of a chronic alcoholic, and that the degree to which that state of mind of a chronic alcoholic had settled in my mind was much farther advanced than any of those other kids in that room. And he said that he had learned something over the years. He said the person trying hardest not to be an alcoholic usually is the worst. And that was me. I was trying so hard to think of any story where I could explain I had turned down drinks this night, I had drank successfully this night, that I was thinking of any reason I could tell you why I did not need to be there, that I was not an alcoholic. But he smashed every possibility with what he had to say to me. I was there, and I was definitely trying the hardest not to be one. So I must have been the worst. So I didn't really like that answer, but I was nonetheless still stuck there. And so I decided that I was going to fake it. I'm going to tell them what they want to hear. I'm going to do everything they want me to do, and then they'll let me out early. And so something switched, though, and it was a good switch. The seed of Alcoholics Anonymous was firmly planted, effectively planted in my mind. During that experience, I heard the truth about myself. And in the same way I just told you that I'm not good about quoting Alcoholics Anonymous, but I know what they're getting at. I knew what they were getting at the first time I heard that jaywalker story in our big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it talks about a person repeating the same behaviors over and over, swearing it off, with or without a solemn oath. And ending up in that position over and over again. Why do I do this? The day I get out, going back and doing this, it was baffling, and I understood that. I had lived similar circumstances where just substitute alcoholism for jaywalking. And there were many examples in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that I told you we were forced to sit through those big book studies. And I identified with so much. I was insulted. I felt like they were teasing me when they said, if you question your alcoholism, go out and try it. Try to drink one and stop abruptly. Try to do it more than once. If you're anything, and I knew that I couldn't do that successfully. And I felt like they were teasing me. How dare they, But I'm such an alcoholic. Can you not just see the alcoholism in my mind, in my thinking? I really did identify with the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. I understand that it was very, I was all of 17 years old. There were very big differences between the men that had written that book and the life that I was living at that time, but I understood it. I got the message. And so, I did eventually get a sponsor, begin to plow through those steps. I only got through steps 1, 2, and 3, made a start on 4. But I even after just working those steps, if we look at the big book, promises are read to us. My favorite promises is the third step, promises. Well, some things happen in a positive way after doing the first 3 steps. And they did. My life began to get better. I began to see God, the presence of a higher power in my life again, where I told you I was raised around a concept of God. I drifted. I became that fallen woman, and then I began to see little glimmers of good in life again and in people, and this possibility of a power, and that there would be hope for me. My life got better just because of stopping drinking. Many things got better. I was able to graduate from high school only because of my participation in that program there, and I was an AP student. I was a kid that had AP credit, and I could not finish high school because of my alcoholism, and so anyway, I got out of that facility, and part of getting out was making a connection to AA on the outside. And I began to visit Alcoholics Anonymous on the outside. And I met a lot of the same people that are there today. It's a different group. Many of you guys went to that group, the Principles Group of Wilson. Principles Group of Raleigh still exists. And then there's a primary purpose group in Wilson now, too, that I helped start years ago. But that group, a lot of those same members are still active in Alcoholics Anonymous that we see all the time. The circle that Daniel was making reference to, those people are still active in lots of different groups. And I was introduced to those same people. They welcomed me, but I was not ready. I was not at the point where I could imagine life, with or without alcohol. I was not desperate. I just didn't quite buy into it all. And so I did go to AA for a while because it seemed like a good idea. Unfortunately, just being a good idea is not enough for me. But I did go for a while. I did, unfortunately, reconnect with my old acquaintances. The vicarious pleasure had a particular pull. That's kind of like the old people, places, and things. The lifestyle pulled, had a pull on me, and I wanted to still be young and live some of that. And so I was dibbling and dabbling in completely opposite lives. I was living a double life again. I was not being honest. And as we hear in How It Works, how many times honesty is mentioned in How It Works. That one of those same people that I mentioned tonight says that a drink for me begins with some type of a lie. And so if I therefore allow any form of dishonesty into my life, it grows and it becomes greater. And the worst lie I could ever tell myself is that I can successfully drink again, But I can get to that point by letting dishonesty start, and that's how dishonesty is powerful. It shuts me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, and that's what I was doing at that time. As I was living a double life, and one day I had my stories. My stories are just like the stories in the Big Book. Like, I had gotten comfortable around drinking. I had turned it down at first. I didn't have any problems turning it down. I was confused about that. I thought a real alcoholic would have crumbled the first time they were exposed to drinking, but I didn't even have a trouble saying no. And I thought, well, that alcoholic mind began to turn. The wheels began to turn, and maybe we caught this in time. Maybe I wasn't as bad as they thought. Maybe I've learned enough information that I'll be able to catch it before it gets out of hand this time. I mean, all those things began to run through my mind prior to taking that first drink. And one day, without even planning it, without even seeing it coming, I ended up drinking. I truly it wasn't even a conscious decision to do it. It's just like a reflex. I was just comfortable around my people that I had already gotten, back in touch with and been hanging around. And one day I was just there and I took it into my body. I remember immediately realizing after it had gone in my body, not before putting it in my body, I remember realizing afterwards, look what I've done, I've messed up. And I immediately said, well, I felt absolutely cheated that I had been introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous so young. That was on my first 4-step. I felt denied of good years drinking. I was so angry that when somebody would talk about being able to drink for 30 years, I was so angry that I had been introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous so young. Just cheated, robbed of those good years. And so I just thought, well, I was introduced to AA unfairly, unjustly, too young, and I deserve to have good years too, in my years drinking too. And so, wasn't that what adolescence was about? Isn't that even what healthy, good adolescents talk about, being at college and having good college years drinking? I mean, don't I get those things too? And so, I put it into my body. I realized it after the fact, and I immediately said, you know what? I'm going to go back out and I'm going to drink for 10 more years. And I'm going to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous when I'd turned 18 by that time. I'm going to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous when I'm 28 years old, and I'll have plenty of time to restart my life. And every time I hear that, I hear two things. Number one, y'all are my people, and y'all have always been my people. I've noticed that from the very first time I went around you. The things I love about Alcoholics Anonymous members, I can't scare them. I can scare school counselors. I can scare good, nice church people. I have scared a Catholic priest doing a confession with him. And so, I could not scare you guys, and I loved that. And another thing that I love about Alcoholics Anonymous members is that you speak from experience. You didn't learn it in school. I heard the language of the heart. The stories you tell, only a person who had lived that would know those details. And I had lived many of those stories, and I knew that you weren't lying, and I loved you people, and I felt home here. Another thing that I particularly loved about the circle I fell into was that we didn't beat our wounded. There was a lot of support there. I was a person that was picked on my whole life, and AA did not pick on me, and it was just wonderful. And so I loved AA, and I knew this was my place, and if I was able to make it back, I'd come back in 10 years. I would make it back to you guys. This is my home. The other thing is that I said, I'll come back in 10 years and I'll have plenty of time to restart my life. And I am a person that loses everything when I drink. I'm a non-functional drinker. I don't know what functional drinking is. I don't come anywhere near it. I'm a person that I don't shoot. I go out for lunch and have a drink and don't make it back for the afternoon shift. I'm the person that goes out drinking on the weekend and cannot show up to open up a business on Monday morning. I'm a person that I cannot pull it together. I cannot function. I liked it when the room was spinning, and if the room is spinning, I know even a lot of members of AA don't like that feeling, but I loved it. And when the room was spinning, I was just right. Well, obviously, if the room's spinning, there's not a lot of functioning going on. So that's what I drank to every time I drank. And so anyway, I went back out. I returned to drinking. I tried to implement all those things that I said I was going to implement, that I was going to catch it before it got out of hand. I was going to implement all this self-knowledge that I had, that I was going to stop things, and it was going to be different. And it was not different. It was worse than where I left off. What do they say? Jails, institutions, and death, and by God, I've been to jail, institutions, I've been to those, and death was the only thing. And the problem with this scenario, though, is that my death was not going to come fast enough. That the lifestyle I lived when drinking put me in contact with a lot of dangers. People, bloodborne illnesses, anything, you name it. And so that was what was going to take me down. But the problem is that years ago, those bloodborne illnesses, a lot of the ones that scare us so bad had no cure and had no management. And so they were real death sentences. And I was exposed to HIV when I was back in that return to drinking. And it was I don't want to, I was a rough case, and I was a low bottom alcoholic, and I was out there in the middle of everything. And so I ended up going to jail that night. And my parents would not bond me out. The first night I drank, I didn't. There was a period of about 3 months that I made it drinking. I did not make it 10 years. I only made it 3 months. But I ended up going to jail. My parents told me that I could stay right there where I was, that they knew where I was. They could sleep peacefully at night, and that I could wait for my court date. And that was, like a real eye-opener, like, they're done. They're finished. And I got the message. I was good. My friend's mom was in the cell already. We came in for different reasons, but I was good. That kind of shows the lifestyle I was living and who I was running with. But I remember that a girl was in the jail cell she was doing state time, and she was in with a big 12 and 12, the AA literature. And I asked her if I could borrow it. I was starting to hit a bottom. I was hurting to be open again. And so I started reading a little bit. I don't know if y'all know anything about Catholics, but we are known for reciting prayers and memorizing prayers, and often not even knowing what we're praying because we memorize them so much. But I could not, and I'm a Catholic today, so I'm not talking bad about us. I still practice. But I couldn't even remember the Lord's Prayer. Like, that is unheard of. And I tried. I just kind of started reaching out, to God in that time. After a while, I had some problems with secured versus unsecured bond. I couldn't get myself out. So eventually, after I was able to get out, somebody bonded me out. That 54-year-old drinking buddy I had, she got me out. And we went and drank, and that very next month was just one of the darkest months I've ever lived in my life. It was just that blotting out the reality of life. The consequences that I had to face were consequences that a good lawyer couldn't fix, a good doctor couldn't fix. And I just didn't see much hope in life any longer. And I just proceeded to blot out every moment, drink as much as I could and as often as I could, just to blot out the reality of life. And so I ran out of, my reputation preceded me in the town that I was. I might have just had a scarlet letter on there. I'm from a small town. Everybody knew, everything about me. And I was rejected by, my peers. No one would have anything to do with me. And I couldn't even get people to come and pay for me to drink. Because something, might have been in exchange for that, but there was nothing in exchange any longer. And it was a really low human experience for me. And so I ended up coming back, going out drinking on Christmas Eve of 98. Against my mother begging me not to go. She asked me, please do not ruin another holiday for us. I rolled cars on Christmas Day. I gave my dad black eyes before holiday pictures. I went to jail right before holidays. And my mom begged me, please do not ruin another holiday for us. And I had to go out. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. I needed the effect produced by alcohol, the relief, the effect produced by alcohol. And so I went out that day. Some friend just came and picked me up and didn't ask anything in exchange, just came and paid for me to drink that night. And And I remember something happened that night that had never happened before, is that the alcohol, no matter how much I drank, it did not work. It did not shut off my mind. It did not shut off those what ifs. It did not shut off the reality of what life had become. And I remember telling him this was not my pattern, but mid-drinking, I told him to take me home. And I don't know where it came from. I never did that. I always let it run through and then came home, even snuck in the house, while they were at work or something like that. But I went home. I actually interacted with my family that night. I wanted something to eat or drink from the refrigerator. I was running the streets. I thought I was all tough and thugged out, and so I was going up against my mom and just demanding something. She's opposite of that, and I was scaring her. And I remember as she went through the refrigerator trying to get me something, she said, "You want this? You want this? You want this?" And I just, our eyes met, and I remember seeing that fear in her eyes and sadness in her eyes, and so that was my moment of clarity. I did not know that in the moment, but I see that looking back, that something began to change inside me. The very next day is the day that I mark as my first day of sobriety, and this period of sobriety. I was in very bad shape. I was not bathing regularly. I was a night shift waitress. I would get off and just start drinking in the mornings. My plans were completely dictated by what we ran across and who we ran across that day. And so I wasn't bathing, and I had a sore on my body that I believe was from not bathing. And I was in bad shape. It was very painful, but I was willing where I had not been willing. I had been willing. Something was different. I was willing to take suggestions. I was willing to do anything this time. And I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous in a terrible shape, but just deciding that I was going to give AA one last try. I was going to take all their suggestions. And if it failed, I was going to be able to die, go on to the bitter end, knowing that I had tried, that I had sincerely tried. I was going to have no reason why it failed me. And I approached AA like that this time, coming in. And I plugged in. I was afraid not to take suggestions. I got a sponsor again, the same one I had before. She was just fine. I was the problem. You know what I'm saying? I got her to work with me again. She began to walk me through these steps, the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. We took them as they're laid out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When they say act, we act. When they say pray, we pray. We just followed it, word for word. And I began to have that spiritual experience that's produced by practicing these steps as a way of life. And I was taught how to practice them in my life. And I began to walk through the miracles, the promises that they say will happen once I took certain actions began to happen. And hope was born. And I began to follow. I've kept following this path. Doors have opened. I have resisted change. I have resisted growth. I do not like to write inventory. I do not like to look under the carpet. Can't we just sweep it all over there and just close the door on that stuff? But I understand that if I want to stay sober, if I want to continue to grow, I have to look at that stuff. I have to take those actions. I have to do those things that are uncomfortable. 6 and 7. 5, I told you I could scare people. Fortunately, my first sponsor worked in a closed custody men's prison, so there was no scaring her. I had to test her out just to make sure, but she was untouchable. She was great, and she was not a gossip. The ladies didn't hear about my stories from later, and they didn't treat me differently. So she was good to go. I did a fifth step with her. I experienced promises likewise after taking my first fifth step. 6 and 7 were transformative for me. The same way that I had kind of lived a double lifestyle coming into AA that first time, I attempted AA this time, living another double lifestyle. I started AA like that. I did not change. When you have a drunken horse thief and you get him sober, you may have a sober horse thief. I was a sober horse thief. And the only thing that had been removed in some respects had been the alcohol. And so I was still doing some things, lifestyle decisions, selfish decisions, actions, dependence, false dependence on men as opposed to God. Just a lot of things that needed to be settled out if I hoped to be able to stay here and be able to honestly live this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And a lot of those things began to adjust out in steps 6 and 7. I had to get honest with them. I had to suffer a lot of consequences. I had to come very close to drinking again because of one in particular thing that I was involved in that was so dishonest and selfish and harmful to other people. In early sobriety, I was still doing all this stuff. And so I had to really get honest and get both feet in this program if I hoped to stay in this program. And I was able to move through that and move to the other side. a different woman as these steps continue to transform me. Now, all that negative, unspiritual behavior I was doing sober, what it did was that it opened the door for the obsession to drink to come back in. And so I'm not a person that was immediately freed from the obsession to drink. I lived with it heavy for the early part of my sobriety. The literature talks about what to do with that. They say when all else fails, work with another alcoholic will save the day. And they talk about extreme work with other alcoholics, going, finding people. I was all of 18, 19 years old. Nobody was knocking my door down to be their sponsor. My first sponsor also told me I dressed like a hooch and no one was going to ask me to be their sponsor because nobody wanted a hooch to be their sponsor. And so she loves for me to say that nowadays. She even, if I don't say that, she even gets on me for not saying it. And so, but she said it in a loving way. But there was a lot of transforming that still needed to happen. But so I went where they needed sponsors. I started going back to that women's prison around the corner close to where I lived, and they needed more sponsors than we could ever find. And so I began to work with the steps with those ladies. I would do the same big book stuff. I would go in the morning. I would stay all day. I'd even eat meals with them. People would ask me, "Aren't you afraid to go in that prison?" I was like, "No, those are my people." I was more afraid that I'd join them as opposed to them do harm. And it was a solution. It was something that carried me through those years where it was so fragile. And I do mean years. I stopped drinking alcohol. I told you I've got a lot of mental health considerations. You may see that in me right now. You may not. I'm a lot better than I used to be. But I had a lot of stuff to begin to sort through, a lot of changing to be made, a lot of practice of this program that had to become the new way that I thought and the new way that I lived. I was guided on how to do 8th and 9th steps. I began to trudge through those and to clear away some of the wreckage of my past. I began to, I did the 10th step. I did the 10th step long before I got to the 10th step. I think that that's active working with a sponsor. It just kind of staying current, being honest, things like that. Looking for where I was selfish, dishonest, resentful, fearful. The 11th step helped me a lot with my anxiety. I'm still, I'm a high, energy person, and naturally, I'm not a Zen person, but I'm working on that. I've learned how to switch it on and off a lot better than I used to, and meditation and prayer has really helped me with that. And then the 12th step, getting to that has been my salvation, the ladies in my life. It's the thing that carried me through that period of time where I was obsessing about drinking. It's the thing that, as I've continued to stay sober, it's the thing that's carried me through the beautiful and new things that are put in my life that are still kind of challenging for me to do. I've been able to stay sober, and I was able to... I'm a girl that ran the Roach Motels on 301, where I'm from, and I was able to go to a prestigious college and on the same level, those kids that I used to hate and compare myself to, I was able to defend my own there. I was able to graduate with honors there. I got a profession. I have a professional license today to practice dental hygiene. I had to go before the board and explain my colorful past before they would give me a license, and I'm honored to have that. I have worked the same job now for 19 years at the same practice. I'm very happy there. And I love the profession that I believe was handpicked for me, that my power showed me this is what I want you to do, and it's been a great profession for me. I've been able to work the steps many times and work, learn how to live. All these new experiences I don't know how to live through, but the wealth of experience here in Alcoholics Anonymous and the working of the steps to continue to peel that onion and reveal those things in me that need to be changed, that stand in the way of me being able to participate fully in life, have been minimized and resolved little by little. I've still got a lot. I've been able to meet someone that I could share my life with here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm guided still to this day, some days better than others on how to share a life with another person. I'm not good at that. Number one, I was never monogamous, but I am now. And I've learned how to do that in Alcoholics Anonymous. But number two is just to be able to lower my selfishness. I'm the most selfish person, I've ever met. And I have children today that have never seen me drink. I am able to, raise them in a transparent, honest way, but I don't want to expose them to too much, of my story before they are ready to handle it. But Alcoholics Anonymous is alive in our home, and it's not a secret what we do. It's the way that we live. And so I've had so many women in my life that, opportunities to practice these principles, and women that I used to hate women, and the program has broken that down. I remember the first time that it was ever broken down. I had a lady out of prison on pass, and it was a lady that we would have clashed, we would have hated each other when drinking. And I remember something neat that really happened where I saw that this program has the ability to break down barriers. And I saw the way that we had formed a kinship and a friendship and a sisterhood that in a way that no other program can do that kind of thing. And it's been powerful. The relationships that have been formed through this program and the experiences that I've been able to have. And I'm just going to close. I'm honored and privileged to be here today. I want to thank, all of you guys for being a part of my sobriety and of being the beacons that I follow. And, AA has given me the opportunity to live 2 lives in one. And I have lived each to the fullest, like a movie. Both of them are polar opposites. But I don't know any other place where the same person that lived the way that I lived has the opportunity to come back and live a totally opposite life. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for the watch. I will give this back.